Namaste and welcome to the Festival of Bharat. My name is Divyanshi Sharda, your host. The guest we have today for our show is Sri Savio Rodriguez ji. Savio ji is a serial entrepreneur with a business interest in media, information technology, and realty. He has over 25 years of work experience in the field of journalism and communications. He is most respected for his role as the founder and editor in chief of the Goa Chronicle, a globally recognized online news portal. He's popular panelist on TV and web talk shows hosted in India and internationally. His nationalistic views, progressive thinking, and dedication to the pursuit of truth on matters of social justice and corruption have been admired by many Indians globally. Savioji, namaste and welcome to our show.
Namaste, and thank you for having me on your show.
So, Savioji, there has been a huge uproar against the potential use of biowarfare by China in the form of coronavirus. So, could you give us some insight into this claim?
Well, to be honest and to be absolutely brutal in my statements that I've been making for the last 1 year, I firmly believe, with all the research materials that we have looked into, that have come from very reliable scientists, researchers, and organizations around the world, there is no doubt in my mind that the COVID 19 pandemic, which has been triggered by the coronavirus, is a bioweapon of China. Now, China has been experimenting with biowarfare from 1996 onwards. If you actually look at their policies, the way they've gone about working on it, biology, biotechnology has been one of the core focuses of China in terms of warfare. They were always looking at having a competitive edge when compared to the Western nations as far as global economic dominion or superpower, as you would call it, status to acquire that. So what China has been doing, and these are research documents, books written by people who were part of the military university of China, people who held senior positions in the PLA. They've been writing books about how biotechnology, how biology can be used for warfare. They believed that they had to control the dynamics of the game. Now, a
Mhm.
lot of the traditional warfare dynamics was controlled by the West. So whether it was armaments, whether it was policies, whether it was nuclear treaties, these were all controlled by decisions taken by the West. China wanted to have a competitive advantage, and that's why they ventured into the field of biotechnology and even more. In fact, this is just one of the aspects of the bio warfare that China has brought out. Its ability to target certain nations, have an extremely virulent effect on certain nations while not having that much of an impact on other nations, go to show that the bio warfare that is used by China has been genetically modified to target certain specific genetic originating people, via their genes. And that's why you saw a lot of cases in the US, you saw a lot of cases in India, and you saw only 90,000 odd cases in China. Now, either China has done, and I'm going by the reported numbers, I'm not going to speculate on numbers that could be more, because there is no verifiable source to confirm whether those numbers are more or not. But let's
Hmm.
go by the global numbers that they've been showing. China is at 90,000 cases and a little over 4,000 deaths. Now, it makes me wonder in great awe that this intelligent virus was able to travel all around the world,
Hmm.
infecting so many different people, different genetic makeovers, but had very little impact on China. Outside Wuhan, there really wasn't much of a pandemic as compared to what was within Wuhan,
Precisely.
right? And so that leads me to think that two things. Okay, one is that they must have done something correct, China. So you could say maybe China's lockdown measures were better, Or it could also mean that China was inoculated before.
True.
Why is it that the pandemic was able to be controlled in China, but it spread to the rest of the world? Now, one of the reasons that people need to understand and why the world is now finally opening up their eyes after a year is that China, firstly, the cases did not happen just as at December 31st, as the World Health Organization first reported. In fact, the cases were way before December. Sometime in mid November, there were cases already showing up.
Mm-hmm.
But so they had this timeline. They had timeline. So by the time who called for a public health emergency of international concern on January 30th, which was now almost a month plus, according
Hmm.
to actual data and not WHO or China's data, they had almost 8 weeks for the virus to spread inside Wuhan. And you must remember that people were traveling out of Wuhan, right?
Yes.
They were going to the airport. While travel on January 23rd was restricted from Wuhan to other parts of China, China did not restrict travel from Wuhan to the rest of the world.
Mm-hmm.
And that's very important because they realized that they needed to contain the spread of the pandemic inside China, and which is why they stopped travel from Wuhan.
Yes.
But they didn't do that for the international travel, right?
Hmm.
The second most
True.
important aspect is how did the virus travel? Let's assume that it was not deliberately released, because I would like to think China's got some level of humanity. But let's assume that it was not deliberately leaked. At some point of time, they had to have this would have had to have traveled in some manner, right, outside the Wuhan. Maybe it was a
Yes.
mistake. Maybe somebody was careless. Wuhan has had cases, at least two cases in the past, where there were incidents of carelessness that has been noticed in,
Yes. True.
during the SARS time as well. Two major cases, five minor cases had been reported over there. So it's not that they were not prone to skirmishes or problems within the lab. There could have been a leakage. So let's assume they didn't deliberately do it and there was a genuine leakage. So what happened was you had the leak over there. Now the Wuhan Institute of Virology, or the Wuhan Virology Lab as it's called, the closest commutation point, public transportation, is the Metro Line 2.
Yes.
The first four cases that came out and were treated at the hospital, the PLA Wuhan hospital, meaning the Army Military Hospital.
Hmm.
That is also connected to Metro Line 2.
Okay.
The Hunan seafood market, which according to World Health Organization is the pandemic source, that is also connected to the Metro Line 2.
Hmm.
And fourth most important is that the international airport is also connected to Metro Line 2.
Mm-hmm.
So anybody at any point of time coming out of the supposed case areas would have used the Metro Line 2,
Yes.
which
True.
has people. So on the Metro Line does about 1 million travelers a day,
Okay.
roughly. Okay. Now this is also the quickest way to get to the airport. So a lot
Hmm.
of people during that pandemic period, when they realized that there was a pandemic and people were now allowed to travel out of Wuhan,
Yes.
they would have used the metro line, and that's how it spread. So from the metro line, they came to the airport, and from the airport, they went to the rest of the world,
True. True.
right? But they were not allowed to go to the rest of China. So China had locked down the other cities by then, right? So it all goes to show that it was very well planned. I'm not saying that what they did was deliberate. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm
Hmm.
saying the science that was being studied or experimented, which was funded by the US government as well,
Yes.
was to work on bioweapons. Now, the problem is when you're dealing with bioweapons, under whatever theory that you might want to propagate, the fact of the matter is there is always an element of risk that the virus can get out in the open, the
Yes.
chimeric virus of it, and that's when the problems will start, and that's exactly what has happened. Now, what China did was in order to save themselves, they took a head start of 2 months.
Hmm.
Before,
Yes.
the World Health Organization called it a public health emergency of international concern. But even then, the people in the rest of the world did not care about the World Health Organization's public health emergency of international concern. They were
Okay.
really worried on May 11th when the
Hmm.
World Health Organization categorized it as a pandemic. That was
True.
another 6 months later, 6 weeks later, sorry. Okay.
Yes.
Which means, so you have the month of December, you
Hmm.
have the month of January, you have the month of February, and then you have 2 weeks of March. Almost, almost over 90 days that the virus
True.
spread throughout the world. And the World Health Organization only called it a pandemic on March 11th. Now, they argue, the World Health Organization argues that as per our IHR rules, we have
Hmm.
only PHEIC, that's Public Health Emergency of International Concern, as our highest level of warning. But that is
Okay.
also untrue,
Oh,
because in their own document that they brought out in 2013, they have mentioned that besides PHEIC, the pandemic is also a terminology that they can use when the cases get severe and start spreading around the world.
true.
But they
True.
did not do that. So you
Hmm.
had almost 90 days of this virus being floating around different parts of the world, including China, and that is why the entire thing got triggered. Now, the World
Very
Health
true.
Organization, Dr. Tedros himself is known to have close association with China, with
Mm-hmm.
President Xi Jinping. It's known. The problem
Hmm.
right now, other than Donald Trump in the US, nobody raised the issue of China's connection to the virus, to the Wuhan virology lab, and to Dr. Tedros as well.
True.
Unfortunately, Donald Trump is no longer the president of the US, and that is
Yes.
why you now have China flexing his muscles at different quarters and different power centers. But the truth will not stay hidden for long, because
True
people
that.
will ask questions. There are about 3.3 million people or more who have died. People need answers, and that's what we're going to get out of China.
Very true, Savyaji. And this angle, the way you have explained in such detail as to the chronology of events that took place and the meticulous planning that China had apparently done with regards to the pandemic is really commendable, because these were the bits of information which were unknown to us. We did not know that China had gone to such extents to ensure that the virus spreads internationally but not nationally. So that's a new piece of information which is really intriguing, honestly. So, if I were to shift focus, Savyuji, to the COVID oxygen crisis that India witnessed very recently, especially in the city of Delhi, which led to a blame game between the state and the center. So, ultimately, the questions that a lot of people, the general public, is asking is that who indeed was responsible for the oxygen shortage, and how is the government then subsequently handling this?
Well, to be honest, the most important aspect of where the second wave actually took off in India was the fact that a lot of us in India, including the government, both at the center and various states across the country, felt with the vaccine coming in, India would be able to mitigate the second wave if it ever did arrive. So that
Yes.
was complacency number one that set in. Having said that, I think the government was working towards creating better healthcare systems as far as India was concerned. But the second wave hit all of a sudden. The mutation of the virus started to have its impact, and people did not know how to deal with this mutation. It was
Yes.
spreading faster. It was spreading uh, across the age groups that were not known to get the virus. First the senior citizens were considered to be the target, then the citizens between the age group of 30 to 45. So it started spreading into the younger adults and then younger people as well. When I mean younger, I'm talking 18 to 30 onwards. So
Yes.
people didn't understand the virus, the second variant of the virus, the double mutant, as you would call it. The government and various other aspects of governments across the country were busy with their own governance, as you would call it. There were elections, there were people, markets were open, people were going to markets, people were traveling to different destinations. Everything was coming back to some sort of normalcy till the second wave came. So in
Yes.
that case, if you were to ask me who's to be blamed, I think all of us as Indians are supposed to be blamed for what has happened.
True.
Okay. Just like you would say in with America, when America faced the first wave, if you go by figures of last year, you've seen a really robust healthcare system like America actually crumble
True.
under the weight of the virus and its effects. The same thing happened to India. But India is not a robust healthcare, does not have a robust healthcare system. It has not acquired that. It will take us some time to become a robust healthcare system. But
Yes.
in that complexity, in those problems that we have as a healthcare system, I think we were able to at least mitigate some amount of risk. Should have done better, we could have
Yes.
done the best, but I think most governments, including the center and the states, did do good enough to try and mitigate the risk. They could have certainly done much better and best, and we still need to do a lot more improvement as far as our healthcare infrastructure is concerned, as far as our messaging is concerned with regards to the vaccines, because a lot of people still do not want to take the vaccine. There's still
Hmm.
a lot of misinformation going around with regards to whether one vaccine is better than the other. So there's a lot of complications that can be handled as far as communications is concerned. And of course, there is the opposition that is wanting to put the center on a mat, saying that it has failed. That's bound to happen. I don't expect anything else from the opposition because the opposition does not think for India. All they think about is politics, and that's fine with me. But as citizens
Hmm.
of this country, what we should be focused on is trying to become the strong arms of the government in order to contain this pandemic ourselves. You see, many people don't understand the nature of the pandemic. The nature of the pandemic is first individualistic, which means if you can protect yourself, you can stop the spread or
Yes.
you can stop yourself from being infected. What people are expecting is a macro solution to the problem. Of course, there is a macro need and a macro solution to the problem, but you have to deal with it at a micro level as well.
Yes.
If people
Truly.
aren't going to follow COVID protocols, if people aren't going to mask up, if people aren't going to wash their hands, if people aren't going to avoid crowds, if people aren't going to follow immunity, necessary treatment, if they're not going to be healthy and eat well, if they are not going to be able to stop drinking, smoking, and all these things which harm your immunity, obviously you're going to be somebody who's prone to get attacked. The point
True.
is, how healthy are you? Because you must understand that the coronavirus attacks the immunity of a person. So if you
Hmm.
build your immunity well, if you are following COVID protocols, you are ensuring that you individually have kept yourself safe, then you can be sure that your family will also be safe. You can be sure that your society will also be safe, and you can be sure that in all this, at least the place where you are is contained and free from COVID, right? And the coronavirus pandemic. That's the
Yes.
thing. Unfortunately, we have become so cynical a country that everything boils down to the information you get on social media, WhatsApp, media, global media. That's only keen on portraying India with crematorium pictures and dead bodies in a river. Nobody is keen on talking about the fact that there are so many people out there fighting for people to survive, to live. Because at the end of the day, the unique quality of India is humanity.
Truly.
There's so many people. Nobody talks about that. A rickshaw driver helping a patient get to the hospital, a taxi person helping a family get to a hospital. How people have worked to get people beds in hospital, oxygens wherever they require. These are citizens doing it. At a time where certain governments, state governments have failed, at certain places where the center would have not been able to be equipped enough. It is the citizens that have come out and actually done the job of an Indian citizen.
Truly.
Because you must remember, as long as you save one life, you stop one super spreader. That's what the logic is. If I can stop myself from being infected, if I can if I can get myself to be vaccinated, then I know that I will not be able to spread it to somebody else.
Certainly.
It's easy to blame the government, of course, but when you're having a fire happening in your home, where your family is inside the home, are you going to sit down with the neighbor and discuss why the fire hydrant was not in the building? Or are you going to jump into the fire and save your family? Right now,
Exactly.
for us as Indian citizens, it's time to save people, to save lives. We need to get the government to work, whether it's at the state level or the center. We need to put pressure. We need to get them to ensure that more lives are saved. And then at the end of it, when we are out of the health crisis, we can deal with the problems that existed at where we failed. But right
Yes.
now, we need to deal with the crisis for what it is. And the motto should be to save lives. That's the main thing.
Absolutely, Savioji. We have really messed up our priorities during the pandemic, and we have definitely given more emphasis on excessive, incessant criticism over contributing to lessen the impact of the pandemic. And that should definitely be that should be a point when we should introspect and change our attitude regarding the pandemic as well. So, sir, another question to you that I have is you mentioned about as to how the Western media practices shameful vulture journalism in which they shared widely and such unabashedly these very disgusting pictures of our people being burnt at the crematoriums and shared them at such rather put them at sale on such high prices and actually commercialized our misery. So what do you want to say as to why that happens exactly?
I think what you're seeing in India right now, as far as the second wave is concerned, the mutation of the virus and the behavior of the opposition leaders in India and the media, some in India and most of them globally. I think they're playing to a toolkit.
Yes.
That's what I believe it is. I believe they're playing to a toolkit. That toolkit is something that has been orchestrated by the enemies of India, which is a combination of China, US, Pakistan, which are the main enemies I can think in this entire COVID pandemic scenario. Because let me say this out clear, China does not have the intelligence to create a bioweapon, but that intelligence, that funding has come from the US in some form, and that is how they were able to manipulate the situation to their advantage. Dr. Fauci, who is the doctor that heads the COVID crisis in the US,
Hmm.
is actually a guy instrumental in funding Professor Xi Jinping's research into exactly what the coronavirus is doing in the world right now.
True.
Now, if you look at it from a political point of view, and I'm only basing it on logic, and not necessarily insinuating anything, but purely based on logic. All I'm saying is Donald Trump stood against China. He called out China for the virus that it unleashed on the world, and Donald Trump lost the elections. The media targeted Donald Trump in almost the same way that they are targeting Narendra Modi this year.
True.
Donald Trump lost the election because of tremendous negative campaign against him. And coronavirus, the pandemic, was one of the reasons that was shown as a failure of Donald Trump. The other being the Black Lives Matter movement. India is also seeing similar things happening
Yes.
since the last 2 years with the CAA bill, with the farmers' protest. It is getting a lot of international interest, a lot of media writing about it, one-sided reportage of it, and then you have the pandemic that has a double mutant, which is crippling the healthcare system of India right now. So it makes a lot of good negative information flowing out of the country and within the country enough to create chaos and panic. So that the incumbent Prime Minister, Narendra Modi,
Yes.
is made to look as a failure. If you analyze every single article that is written by the global media, every single article written by media that do not like Narendra Modi and the BJP led government in India, there are three main points that come out. Number one, that Modi has failed India. Number two, the Kumbh Mela was the biggest super spreader as far as the second wave is concerned. And number three, which is the most important, is that India and the Indian government does not care for its people because the bureaucrat is incompetent, the prime minister is arrogant, the BJP leaders and their followers are sycophants. That's all you get to read about as far as the global media is concerned. And what do they portray? They portray burning funeral pyres at crematoriums. The idea is to attack two things. The idea is to attack India, and the other one is to attack the Indian culture.
Truly.
This is an attack,
Truly.
if you really analyze it, it is an attack on the Hindus. It is an
Very
attack on
true.
the Hindu culture. Nobody's written anything about the large processions that happen during the Eid or in the run up to the Eid, the Ramadan festival.
Yes.
Nobody has written about the large number of crowds that come to the vegetable markets in different cities in the country. But they talk about a Kumbh Mela, which I attended personally, was probably one of the most COVID protected areas because the facilities, the processes were so stringent. I had to take a test to attend that. So when we registered online, we had to submit our tests that we had done. And then we were able to get our permissions to come into the Kumbh Mela area. When we went to the Kumbh Mela area, there were these sanitizing booths all over. I did not wear a mask for one of the photographs. A cop came to me and told me, please put your mask on and take a photograph with the mask. Don't take your mask off. So if you're telling me that that was a super spreader by design, the answer is absolutely wrong. Because when I was there, I did not see unruly crowds. I noticed pretty good safe distancing over there. But if you're going to ask stupid questions, like some did, that how come he did not wear the mask when he went into the Ganga water, then I have no answers for such stupid questions. Because if you expect a man to wear a mask when he's going inside for the Ganga water, then you've got to be really weird.
Yes.
Okay, and if there's a group of people which are families and five or six of them are together, do you expect them when they are walking down to get into the Ganga water to be separate? They're obviously going to go there together. That is the whole idea of going as a family, right?
Yes.
And more importantly, the rapids were too much. So you have to be careful when you're in that water.
True.
So people try to create this portrayal that India continues to remain to be a third world country. Our healthcare systems are pathetic. Our government is incompetent. Our bureaucrats are incompetent. The only competent people in India are or the oppositions in India. That's the portrayal they want to do. They want to remove Narendra Modi as the prime minister. I do not know who they have in mind as a prime minister other than Narendra Modi, because whoever they will have in their list right now, I can only pray harder than I already pray that that person must never come into power from the opposition.
I can say the same. I mean, I think I share your feelings on this one. So that's a wonderful insight into the list of events that has taken place, Savijay. Thank you so much for that. So, on a related note, like you said, that this is a very calculated campaign that has taken place just for the purpose of maligning India and to probably conduct a regime change, also for that matter. So, why do you think that there is such a big nexus of Indians themselves jumping at every opportunity to malign their own country?
Oh, well, history has shown us that it is not the foreigner who is responsible for the 800 plus years of slavery and submissive lives that the people of India have led. It is the Indian within India that is actually responsible, because we are so submissive a race that we follow the like blind backs
True.
people who are far more powerful than we are. If you go into history, for example, not too far away, if you looked at the British regime in India, the East India Company, and then of course Britain and their soldiers. Who were the main soldiers in those armies? They were
Indeed.
Indians. Who were the soldiers that were responsible when the Mughals were around, that were converted to Islam? They were Indians. You don't require an enemy from outside. We have enough enemies within India. Now, the enemies in India, unfortunately, come from all communities: the Hindu community, the Muslim community, the Christian community,
True.
all communities. They have not learned to understand India as a land of their mother. That's the problem. Because they're so Western influenced, because they're so influenced by greed, by money, by lack of nationalism, by this belief that maybe just because I am politically driven by one ideology, I should follow that ideology because that is more important than my nationality, my nationalism. I think that's the problem with some people in India. So today, India is not divided about caste or creed. India is further divided into political preferences. Either you're for BJP or you're against BJP. Either you're for Congress or you're against Congress. And that's really what this entire problem with India is all about. So when a Rahul Gandhi, when other opposition leaders like Arvind Kejriwal make irresponsible statements in their attempt to tarnish the image of Prime Minister Modi, what they're really doing is that in their hatred for Narendra Modi, they tarnish the image of India as well. That's the problem I have. I don't have a problem if you dislike Narendra Modi. There are certain decisions that the government have taken that I don't agree with it at all. But in our disagreements, We cannot at any point of time belittle India or paint India in a negative light within India or globally. Narendra Modi is Narendra Modi as a person, but Narendra Modi also occupies a chair, that of the Prime Minister of India, and that is a chair of the sovereignty of India.
True.
To me, that's what matters. If there was Dr. Manmohan Singh sitting in this chair right now to deal with this health crisis, I would have shown him equal amount of support that I show Prime Minister Modi. Why? Because the crisis is a national crisis. It is
Yes.
it's not a crisis about a state performance. A state could perform well and another state could fail, and that pandemic would still never go out of India. The point is, this is a national health crisis. This is a crisis that the country has not seen for decades. It is a crisis that the country does not know how to necessarily deal with, because they don't know at what time will the mutation or the virus change its trajectory.
Very
But they
true.
are trying. People are trying. So it's unfortunate. I feel really bad for certain members in the politics, simply because politics doesn't govern the country, in the sense that political differences, political upmanships cannot be the reasons that this country should go ahead or should not go ahead with. It is only the fact that this is India, that these are our people that we need to save, should be the only driving force to take us forward in this health crisis. Today, you have an Arvind Kejriwal, for example. For all Arvind Kejriwal may have not have done in Delhi is irrelevant to me as an analyst. I am saying you spent so much amount of money, roughly about 150 crores on advertising during the second wave of COVID, repeatedly on television channels, you know, day in and day out. But you didn't even bother for a moment to use the same kind of funds. They are not his own money, right? That's not the Aam Aadmi Party's money.
Yes.
That's the taxpayers' money. He could have used that to ensure at least some basic primary healthcare centers, which he spoke about, Mohalla clinics, could have actually become up and running. Delhi did not need to see his face. His face is plastered all over Delhi. We know what his face looks like, right? But we needed to
Yes.
see something on the ground. And that is where people like Arvind Kejriwal failed.
Very
They are
true.
making a mockery of the sovereignty of this country. They're making a mockery of the people of this country. People like Rahul Gandhi. I mean, don't mock your country with your stupidity. The world respects us to being intelligent. But each time you open your mouth, you mock the intelligence of this country, the legacy that your family had, the legacy of this country more than your family. And people like Rahul Gandhi should actually stay at home. I don't have a problem with the Congress, honestly. There's some good people there. But when I see people like Rahul Gandhi, Priyanka Gandhi Vadra, who are basically nothings in their life, nothings. They are there because of a name, they are there because of a legacy. They are not there because of performance. They are not there because of hard work. At least Arvind Kejriwal was there with some hard work. It is different that now he's twisted in his mind. But
Yes.
what has Rahul Gandhi done? What has Priyanka Gandhi Vadra done? These people have no right to lecture the people of India how to deal with the crisis. They're not even telling us how to deal with the crisis. They're telling us the problems. They keep whining and whining and whining, and that's not the hallmark of a leader. That's why Rahul Gandhi will never be a leader.
Very true. Very rightly said.
He at best is a whiner. So if there is a position and there is ever a ministry set up in India They should have two ministries in India. One is the Ministry of Happiness, and the other one is the Ministry of Whiners. And that is where you should give Rahul Gandhi the position.
Very true.
Because
So very
that's the
true.
problem. The problem is fear. If you look at the amount of WhatsApp messages, you look at the Instagram posts, you look at social media, Twitter, Facebook, the amount of misinformation on India and the way India is dealing with the crisis is heart wrenching. This, I don't think our people deserve that. I think our people, the doctors, the scientists, the bureaucrats, some of them, they are really working very hard. They are doing everything that they have done. There are almost 400, 500 doctors who have lost their lives.
Yes.
Why are you insulting their hard work?
True.
Why are you insulting the work of so many people, the frontline workers who are out there to save people? Why are you creating a fear psychosis, a paranoia? We need to get out of this crisis. What is the point of playing politics if you don't have people? Does Rahul Gandhi, Arvind Kejriwal want to have no people, only there are few people in their homes to vote for them? Okay, today we will vote for Rahul Gandhi to become Prime Minister. That's what Rahul Gandhi wants. That's the problem with the country. The problem with the country are these worms.
Very true.
I'm sorry to call them worms, but they are worms.
Very rightly said.
They don't deserve to be in this country. You notice character of an individual in how they deal with a crisis. This is not a political crisis. This is a crisis
Yes.
that affects every Indian.
Truly.
If you don't care about an Indian, then you don't deserve to be in India. You don't deserve the votes of the people. You don't deserve the admiration.
True. Absolutely. And that should be the attitude of our leaders. They should inculcate within themselves and imbibe this basic respect for the country that they live in the country that they're supposed to serve. But unfortunately, especially within the members of the opposition, we do not see such an attitude prevailing, at least amongst most of them, like you rightly said. So, Savio Ji, if I were to shift focus slightly to the anti-Hindu sentiments that are slowly boiling within, not just around the world, but also in India, we witness quite a few of them. So, why do you think that there is a sentiment of Hinduphobia amongst members of certain religious communities in our country?
The reason they have a Hindu phobia is simply because you have Narendra Modi as Prime Minister of India. BJP has always been portrayed as a Hindu majority party. Personally, I don't think it's that. I think the BJP does more for the minority and less for the majority as far as certain schemes and guidelines and rules are concerned, as far as India is concerned. Narendra Modi, being the Prime Minister of India, will find time to tweet about a terror attack in France and Austria, but has not found time to tweet about the lynching of the Palgar Sadhus. The government, and in this case again, Prime Minister Modi, when Shabana Azmi was sick, found time to tweet about Shabana Azmi and ask about her welfare. But the same Prime Minister never found time to tweet about the Palgar Sadhus who were lynched or the BJP leaders. When I mean leaders, every single worker of the BJP is a leader of the BJP. In Bengal, were being murdered after the elections and there are women being raped. He's not spoken a word on that till now. Why is the Hindu phobia? The Hindu phobia exists because countries that are controlled by Islam and Christianity continue to play victim cards against India, that minorities are in danger. The Hindu majority government is going to put minorities in danger. And that is why they feel that the government does nothing to stop these lies. In fact, it goes into a shell. That is why media can so blatantly lie that Indian minorities are in danger. I am a minority in India. In fact, I am the prince of India. That's what I call myself. This is my motherland. This is my mother. Are you going to tell me that just because I'm an Indian Christian, I am supposed to live in fear in India, in my motherland? Fear from whom? Whom? Hindus, who are my brothers and sisters, Muslims, who are also my brothers and sisters, Sikhs, who are also my brothers and sisters. Whom am I supposed to be afraid of? Do you want me, because I'm an Indian Christian, to leave India because of this fear? I'm not going to.
True.
This is my motherland. I have every right in this country, irrespective of my religion. My religion is not my identity. My nationalism is the fact that I'm an Indian, my nationality. That's my identity to the rest of the world. So when media writes that Christians are in danger, I want to know, what are you talking about? Can you please tell me? I'm a Christian. I live in India. I travel around India. Can you tell me what harm has come to me? My children go to good schools. My children do well in their schools. My wife and I, we have a fantastic life living in India. I visit temples, I visit mosques, I visit the church. Where am I in danger? Minorities are in danger? No. Minorities are not in danger in India. But there is conflict, of course. That conflict is on the grounds of religion. And you must understand this distinguishment. Across all religions, there will always be fanatics who will play people one against the other on religious grounds. And that happens across all religions. The Christians will do it. The leaders, the Christian leaders will do it. Some of the Hindu leaders will do it. And some of the Muslim religious leaders will do it. But at a base level, at a ground level, India is a place where a Hindu, a Muslim, a Sikh can sit on the same table and eat and break bread together without being condescending, without being critical, just living as simple Indian brothers and sisters at that table. So this portrayal that they do of India, that they write about, is warped, is a lie. If the Western media wants to learn about India, maybe they should come for a walk with me. And I will take them to places in India and show them how different communities live together. Have you seen people in crisis in India? During the floods, during the bomb blasts, how people from different communities always stand up for each other. So all this Hindu-Muslim divide that they show on Bollywood, all the Hindu-Muslim divide that they show on media, or the Hindu-Muslim-Christian divide, is all false.
Truly.
Small skirmishes in a 1.3 billion population based on religion does not decide the nature of my country. India is, and I have traveled around the world, so I can say with utmost confidence that India is the only place in this world where people of different religions can truly live in harmony if they are not encroaching on other people's space and other people's beliefs. So when a Christian missionary comes to a Hindu and tells him that your God is a demon, do you expect the Hindu to take that lying down? Absolutely not. So obviously you're going to have a skirmish, right? Do the Hindus go to the Christians and say that your Jesus died is all false? So you should not believe. You don't do that. The problem is in the conversion problem. That's the problem happening in India. The divide is happening because of that. The skirmish is minor, is happening because of that. The Islamists want to convert the Hindus and the Christians. The Christians want to convert the Muslims and the Hindus, more the Hindus than the Muslims. Every religion is out there to want to convert. Why? Because India is a fertile land. India's got the population. But they won't change the Sanatan Dharma. Because inside every Christian, inside every Muslim, whether he accepts it or not, if he believes he's the son or daughter of Bharat Mata, then the Sanatan Dharma principles will be with it. And they will rise up. And Sanatan Dharma is not about any dogma, not about any fanatic belief. It's a simple belief that I see the God around me and I see the God within me. It's as simple as that. And that you don't get anywhere else in the world. You will find that in India.
So beautifully put, Savioji. Honestly, listening to this fascinating explanation of India's precious diversity, of how every single community can live together and should live together like they have for so many years. It's really heartwarming to hear that there are so many well wishers and there are so many devout sons of Bharat Ma standing up for her dignity and standing up for her honor. So my final question to you is, Savioji, uh, you mentioned that yes, skirmishes happen in India on the basis of religious grounds. But what would be your concluding thoughts on how these incidental and occasional skirmishes too can be prevented from taking place?
You see, Devyanshi, the most important aspect that's missing in India is the pride of being Indian. It is when I realized this uh, much later, you know, Devyanshi. I was also a boy who grew up abroad. I grew up in the Middle East. I come from Goa, so I have a Portuguese background to me in terms of ancestrally.
Mm.
Uh, but I was never brought up that way. I would like to have thought of myself that way. And when I was young, I would always consider myself to be a foreigner. I
Mhm.
hated everything about India. Whenever I would come to India, I would not even leave my shoes out at the door because I was afraid somebody would rob it. You know, that was my perception of India. Bombay was a land of thieves, and I couldn't trust anybody. And but that's how I was when I was young. So I would always say, I'm a foreigner. I'm not an Indian. I'm a foreigner. I'm not an Indian. And my granddad, my grandfather, when I was about 9 years of age, uh, happened to tell me very, very jovially that, son, it's all right for you to think you're a foreigner right now. It's okay. But one day, Mother India will call you. And then you will leave everything and you will give her your best. Of course, I laughed it out. And I told my granddad very jokingly that that will never happen. You would meet, God before I ever do that. and sadly, a few years later, he did move on. And I still never paid attention to what he said. But way back in 1999, uh, I don't know what happened. I had a choice to go abroad to Canada with the rest of my family and friends. I wanted to do that as well. I thought maybe I should apply. But something told me come back to India. And so in 2020, 2000, I came back to India. And late 1999, early 2000, I was back in India. And even then, I was not, I was getting to learn the ropes. I wasn't as nationalistic as I was. It was when God blessed me with having come in touch with the late Manohar Parrikar, the former defense minister of India, who was then the chief minister of Goa. And the amount of the conversations I had with him, I think the perspective of India and why you should contribute to India as a citizen actually came from him. And I would, if I had to attribute other than my parents and my grandfather, the stirring of the nationalistic spirit in me would have to have been my mentor, the late Manohar Parrikar. And, I used to ask my parents as well, so why don't we take a Portuguese passport, like others? And they would always tell me that you're an Indian. From the time I'm young, I've been told I'm an Indian. So no Portuguese passport or anything of that sort. And I don't know my caste till now because we were not brought up that way. I asked my mother what's my caste and my father what's my caste, and they'll say you're an Indian. So that's where it ends. I don't go beyond that. So I think that's what's missing with the country. I think a lot of people, even in the Christian community, I know a lot of people in the Muslim community, a lot of people in the Hindu community who understand the purpose of being an Indian. It's not there largely, but it's there with a lot of people, and especially in the NRI crowd.
Yes.
You find a lot of patriotic Indians in the NRI Indian group simply because they're so still rooted through their motherland, to their roots, to that Vedic beliefs that they have, even though they are westernized. And I think that's really what India requires. India requires to run a campaign that talks about being proud of being an Indian, irrespective whether you're a Bengali or a Goan or a Maharashtrian or a Hindu or a Muslim or a Christian. You are an Indian, and that's what matters, and that's really what India requires.
That's so beautifully put, Savioji. I mean, I can't thank you enough for sharing with us your wonderful thoughts about India, India's culture, and the unrelenting feelings of patriotism and, should I say, devotion you have for Bharat Maa. And truly, they are very heartwarming and very, very gratifying to listen to. And with this, I would genuinely like to thank you once again for gracing our show with your presence. Dhanyavad and pranam.
Namaste. We hope you enjoyed this Chitti Media content. Please remember to subscribe to us and switch on the notifications for this channel. For our other social media links, more content, and to support our work, please visit citti.net. Dhanyavad. Namaskar.